All right, welcome to These Final Days End Times Roundtable, and I'm Sarah. Pastor Ryan Speakman is here, founder of These Final Days, and his twin brother may be joining us a little bit later, we'll see. But today we're bringing you a special roundtable discussion where we're going to actually talk about comments and questions we've received recently. And Ryan, it's pretty amazing, the common theme we're seeing in a lot of these comments lately. So the theme is basically that the prophetic writings concerning the Antichrist were fulfilled in the first century during the time of Jesus' disciples and fulfilled with the Roman destruction of Jerusalem and the temple in AD 70. And then also we're going to play a segment from one of your classes, Ryan, about the prerequisites that need to be in place before the Antichrist can make his debut on the world scene. So stick around for that. And also we invite you to like and subscribe to These Final Days content. Hit that bell notification so you can stay updated on future content. And if you have some thoughts about our topic today, comment below and let us know. So the $1 million question we're going to answer today, Ryan, was Nero the Antichrist?
Yeah, exactly. So this is going to be an interesting roundtable. I'm guessing that this is going to be the first of, many future discussions about this particular topic. I'm not going to throw out my resume again and say, how many years I've been doing this. It's been quite a few, but in all these years, I've never actually formally addressed this particular end times theory, which is called Preterism. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So like you said, Preterism, what the, principal claim is that the Antichrist, the person of the Antichrist, showed up already 2,000 years ago, did his thing. There is no future Antichrist, but there's actually a whole lot more to it than that. It's not just the Antichrist. It's really the whole end time story. And there's kind of two types of preterism. So the first type, full preterism, that's what actually makes that claim. There is no end times. This all happened 2,000 years ago, including the second coming of Christ, which is utterly bizarre. So I'm actually literally an hour before we went live just now, I was engaging a guy on TikTok, and I've been talking to him off and on for the last couple of weeks. Staunch preterist, but if I'm around to this idea that not only did all the end time stuff take place 2,000 years ago, when the Romans destroyed the temple in Jerusalem, like you said, AD, but in the second coming of Christ took place. Oh my gosh, I just got cloned. I love modern technology.
Can you guys hear me okay?
It's a bit of an echo, but we can hear you.
Yeah, it's because I'm in a tool shed.
Yeah, get out of the tool shed.
Yeah, bad background, and you have a weird glow.
And you're really white.
The deal is with my camera. I'm going to work on that while we're
all right. We'll put you backstage.
Yeah, your audio is like real bad. Yeah, he's going to fix that.
Okay,
so it's cool though. I'm glad he could join us. I didn't think he'd be able to today. Preterism again, even to the point of the second coming, which is just so bizarre to me. And so I wrote this guy just an hour ago, and you think I'd know all this already after, 25 plus years doing this. There, I said it. But that detail was always kind of vague to me. I've always thought, well, they must mean like kind of symbolically he came back, or spiritually he came back. And this person I'm talking to on TikTok, maybe he's not like the world's foremost expert on preterism, so maybe what he's telling me isn't like really the mainstream preterist view. I don't know, but he's saying no, Jesus physically came back to earth on the Mount of Olives 2,000 years ago. So I left off an hour ago with this guy. Bad timing for our show here. What do you mean? Like, if he came back 2,000 years ago, where is Jesus today? Is he still on earth? What's going on? So stay tuned for that. We'll see what happens with that. Anyways, my first time ever addressing preterism all these years. I've been so wrapped up in the question of the timing of the rapture, and I've always kind of incorrectly, by the way, I'll admit it, considered preterism to be just kind of like a fringe idea. There's not a whole lot of people that really believe in preterism. What are you seeing out there, Sarah?
It's becoming more popular. I personally know people who hold to this view, and haven't gone in great length with conversation on how that all works out. But really, I'm surprised at the number of comments we're getting right now. And so you mentioned the different, views of preterism,
Types of
partial
preterism.
and full.
Yeah.
So just so we have a working definition here. And, partial, like, I think you can make a better argument for that because, well, as we'll talk about and discuss in great detail, there's still a lot that needs to be fulfilled, and how this all worked out if Jesus already came, or maybe denying the physical return of Christ altogether, like you mentioned. So, all right, so let's see.
And actually, Sarah, if you don't mind, let me share my screen and
Okay.
want to show you of really good definitions that I found of full versus partial preterism. So let me get back over. Bear with me. So I'm going to try to share my screen here. Let's see how this goes. Right. And let's see. I think this will work. So let me know if you can see that.
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, so this was just an article that happened to pop up in my email within the last week, and gosh, I feel bad. I can't remember the name of the site, but I should have made a mental note. But they post multiple articles every week about the end times, and this was one again that just this week, and these guys who put out this this newsletter, so to speak, they are definitely futurists like you and I are. So this is they're saying this kind of from a standpoint of critiquing the idea. But let me just read this. It says, full preterism teaches that all of the prophecies of the Bible were fulfilled around AD 70. These, and again, for the audience, that's when the Romans came in and destroyed the Second Temple, destroyed Jerusalem 2,000 years ago. These interpreters claim that the prophecies of God's judgment in Revelation, Matthew chapter 24, the Olivet Discourse, right, and elsewhere describe events during the war between Rome and the Jewish people leading up to AD 70 when Jerusalem was sacked, Second Temple destroyed. Preterists teach that these prophecies describe God's rejection of Israel and the Jewish people. So that's an important point about preterism is that it really is a form of replacement theology, which we reject in this ministry, these final days, saying that Christians have replaced the Jews are out, they're no longer God's chosen people. We reject that view. Preterists seem to hold that view. Let me keep reading. Full preterism reasons that because some passages indicate the end will happen soon, and that word is used, these prophecies had to be fulfilled in the lifetime of Jesus' disciples, including prophecies of God's judgment on the nations, Jesus's return. There it is right there. You'd think I would have known this. And the creation of the new heavens and earth. I mean, Sarah, if the new heavens and new earth were created 2,000 years ago, I want a refund.
We missed
Is there
it.
a complete,
right? Something's really wrong.
Yeah. And it says here, it's heresy because preterists teach that Jesus is not coming back. We shouldn't expect any future resurrection of the dead. The current state of the world is essentially in its final form, God help us. But like you said, partial preterism is a little bit more reasonable. Partial preterism tries to avoid the weaknesses of full preterism. Its well-known proponents, including R.C. Sproul, totally know who he is. Gary DeMar, know him. Kenneth Gentry, these are all very well-known people. I would add Hank Hanegraaff is another very, very well-known partial preterist. I think he's partial. Teach that most, but not all, the prophecies of the Bible were fulfilled in the past. Revelation 20 to 22, which talk about the new heaven, new earth, new Jerusalem, Garden of Eden restored worldwide, are still to come. In other words, they recognize the difficulty of claiming that God has wrapped up all of his plans in the past. Most partial preterists, we don't have to get into that part, but so that, I guess that's the difference. Did I stop sharing? I hope. Yes.
Yes, you did.
Okay.
Hi guys, can you hear me okay now? Is it better? I switched cameras and microphones. Okay, good. Good.
And you look better too.
Yeah, you look a little bit better.
I'm always good to hear that. Wow.
The spear behind you is a little bit intimidating, but
what buttons can I push in real life to make myself look better?
Yeah, really. Wouldn't that be great? Yeah, they're working on that. So
outside this live stream. Yeah.
Yeah. So Aaron, what do you know about preterism? We're going to try to debunk the heck out of this theory today. We're attacking preterism.
Yeah, what do I know about it? I mean, any preterists watching are going to shoot me down for my very minimalist understanding of it. But so preterism to me, and I'm sure there's a wide variety, like you were saying that, Hank Hanegraaff, for example, is a partial preterist, or was. I haven't heard much about him. I don't even know if he's still around or alive. But anyway, so there's going to be different varieties of preterism, but my understanding is that everything in prophecy already happened except for the second coming. So, out of the starting gate for me, it's kind of weird. Like we have this whole book called Revelation. It's a mirror of Daniel, partial mirror of some other prophetic Old Testament books and some, verses in the Gospels. And this whole book, Revelation, everything has happened except for this one tiny thing at the end. So to me, that's weird. That would place our generation, like people reading Revelation, in chapter 21 of the book, right? So it's kind of weird.
No, it would actually be more like chapter 18 or something, because the second coming happens in Revelation chapter 19.
Yeah, I mean, I'm generalizing because I don't.
Sure.
I still don't have all the numbers memorized.
All the trumpets, bowl judgments, seals, all of that.
Yeah, right.
Completed with.
Yeah. So exactly. So for me, that's kind of weird. Like we have a book that is mostly stuff that is in the past, because John wrote in 90 AD. So if Revelation was about Nero and the destruction of the temple, that was 20 and 30 years earlier, before John wrote it. So he writes this book called Revelation. It's kind of in future tense, but it's about the past, except for the last few chapters. So to me, that's kind of weird out of the starting gate. And then my other understanding is I know of a couple of their strongest arguments. One is that the number of the beast, 666, was Nero. And I'd love to have you guys talk about that in some detail And, we have strong reasons for believing that is a great argument. It's a great argument that 666 was Nero. We've looked at the research, we've looked at the reasoning, but there's a better argument, there's a better interpretation, and that came to us primarily through Irenaeus. So that's kind of my understanding of preterism.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good, and really what you're describing is what Sarah and I just showed on the screen here. That's called partial preterism, which is what you said, like everything's been fulfilled except the second coming of Christ and maybe the new heaven, new earth, new Jerusalem, but all the other stuff. And it just doesn't fit, right? Because in the book of Revelation, the second coming of Christ takes place in Revelation chapter 19. And to just like pluck that out and say, well, that's 2,000 years in advance. Well, you're kind of like, polluting your entire argument that, hey, if this was all written about back then and Jesus is saying, I'm coming back very, very soon. But then you take that one thing about him coming back and say, okay, well, we'll put that one way in the future. So right on its face, it kind of like, cancels itself out. But full preterists, it's a bizarre, Aaron. And I mean, I apologize to everybody, the world, whatever, that I haven't dug more into preterism. I've always kind of dismissed it. It's a fringe theory. Sarah and I were talking about how that's just not the case. It's becoming more and more popular, but my point is, I'm going to be digging in even more. I want to, really understand. If we claim to be a legitimate end times ministry here at These Final Days, we need to address all the mainstream views that are out there. And preterism, it really is a mainstream view more and more every day. Now, can I ask you too your opinion on this? Because I definitely have an opinion. Why would preterism be right now becoming more popular, really, than it's ever been? I think. Why is this taking off as a popular belief about the end times? Oh, I got a good theory. Come on, this is easy.
I mean,
go ahead, Sarah.
I was just going to say, basically, so that we don't have to worry about an end times Antichrist and all the things that happen. I mean, the judgment that's coming upon the world and the world system. And I don't know, I just feel like it's another one of those deceptions that, Jesus specifically tells us to be, aware of. Do not be deceived.
Yeah. I have a very good preterist friend, but one of my best friends, Ryan, too. We'll call him Pete for the sake of the live stream.
Sure, just
maybe
Pete.
Yeah. Maybe he's watching. So he and I have gone back and forth a lot about this, and he's smarter than I am. I really respect him. My feeling with him is that what's happened in recent years is, there's been a lot more talk being stirred up about the end times. When is the pre-tribulation rapture? Or if there's no pre-tribulation rapture, when are we going to see, the trumpets, for example, or the sixth seal if it hasn't happened yet? So all this talk is being stirred up, I think, for two reasons. Number one reason is social media. In the last days, information will be, or knowledge will be greatly increased. I think that's social media, internet, not just social media, the internet, news, instantaneous international news. All the information is just all over us. We're buried in it. Every common person from Kazakhstan to Siberia to South America to Temecula, where I live. The number two reason out of two reasons is that it's probably true that we're getting close, right? So those of us who are watching are seeing things. If we're watching super carefully, we're seeing things that say, yeah, we're getting close. So I think for my friend Pete, his knee-jerk reaction is, oh, please, let's not do this again. In the 1800s, people were going into caves and committing suicide because they thought that the end was nigh. This has happened over and over. The UFO death cults in the 90s. T and Doe, what was that? Heaven's Gate cult, right?
Gate,
the end is near. We better, so there's chaos and suicide and trouble and fighting. And it's just a terrible thing to happen. So let's not do that again. We've been doing it for 2,000 years. Let's just say it's all happened. And here's the evidence for it. Nero equals 666. Second coming was some weird desert thing. Because a lot of preterists say the second coming actually.
What do they think the second coming was? But let me add a
argument from.
Yeah. Let me add a spiritual component to this. So we are in the last days. There is an end times. They are upon us. We're going to eke all this out in this podcast here, this live stream. I mean, I've got tons of evidence about what I just said. We are in the end times right now. 2,000 years later, we're in the end times. But because we are, Satan is more on the prowl than ever. His main target, of course, is the body of Christ. We're the only ones who are a threat to him, and we're the ones who, like if he hurts us, he's hurting God. In the worst possible way, right? So we're his target. His aim is deception. That's what he wants to bring upon the body of Christ. Preterism is just another angle or the same spirit behind the pre-tribulation rapture doctrine, which says, hey, God loves us so much, he's going to take us all out of here before the Antichrist shows up. We don't have to prepare for the Antichrist. We don't have to think about it. We could talk about it for fun. Preterism says the same thing. This all happened 2,000 years ago. There is no Antichrist coming. What does that do? It makes a person completely unprepared for what's coming, open to deception, a target for the Antichrist. The three of us here, right? And I think a lot of our audience too by now, we actually suspect that there's a gentleman in Damascus right now. He's been there for a year, the new president of Syria, that is just checking all the boxes for the one that the Bible calls the Antichrist, the Muslim Mahdi. If maybe we're right about this, then now is the time for doctrines like preterism to take off, because that's what the enemy needs. So, yeah, I'm saying it's a.
Yeah, sure. My people perish for lack of knowledge, right? Any way that Satan can deceive us or divert our attention. Hey, look over there. This isn't really happening. Look at preterism. Look at pre-tribulation rapture. If it's a false doctrine, right? That's what we're talking about today, whether it is or not. Not the truth is going to be a distraction from the things that God could actually use to help us in times of trouble. So of course, Satan would be in favor of fomenting those doubts about the futuricity.
Oh, sure.
Of the Revelation events.
We're in the last days. Again, I think the Antichrist very well may be on the world scene right now. Almost no one's noticing him, right? The guy in Damascus, Ahmad al-Sharaa, I'll just say the name. And amazingly interesting. We've been researching this guy and talking about him for the last year. And again, he's just checking all the boxes. It's uncanny. But if that's the case, it's just urgent that the body of Christ needs to wake up. We are going to face the Antichrist. It probably is coming very soon. Sarah, can you see that comment by Greg Holman in our chat?
I just saw that.
It says Pastor Chuck Baldwin claims that Revelation was written in the year AD 65. So Greg, you're hitting the nail on the head. This is oh yeah, many believe Trump is the Antichrist. Yeah, he's not. He's a big part of the story. I'm not going to downplay that in the least. President Trump's a huge part of this story. The Antichrist rising to power, gaining power. That's all very biblical, and we're seeing it before our very eyes. But this idea that Revelation was written in the year AD 65, I love this one because this is the Achilles heel of the preterist doctrine 100%. And the reason that for a preterist, Revelation has to have been written in AD 65 is because it's undeniable that in Revelation. Go ahead, Sarah. What is it?
I was just going to say because Nero, he committed suicide in what, AD 68, right?
Yes, but
oh, go ahead.
Well, no, but what I'm saying though, from a preterist standpoint, they need Revelation to have been written in AD 65 because the temple was destroyed in AD 70, but John in Revelation chapter 11, very clearly describes the physical Jewish holy temple standing on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem.
Right.
So it's funny because I'm telling you, over the years when I've actually engaged preterists, this is how the conversation. I swear to you, I'm not exaggerating. This is how it goes every time. I tell them, what Aaron said before. The book of Revelation was written in the year AD, about the year AD 95. Aaron said 90. It's really closer to 95. I'll show that to you guys. And then they'll come back and say, no, Revelation was written in AD 65. And I say, well, what evidence do you have that it was written in AD 65? Because the temple was destroyed in AD 70 and Revelation describes a temple. That's what's called a circular argument. I don't understand. Preterists strike me as intelligent. I mean, they really do. They come across, very coherent, and to make that kind of an argument. So one question like Greg Holman brings up in our chat, one question we might ask is, okay, but what is the historical evidence that it was written in AD 95? And we do have that, but I don't want to take this over. Sarah's in charge. Sarah, what do you want to look at first? I mean, there's so many. Go ahead.
Let's just look at some of the comments that we've received recently. So this one, you can't tell me that when you read from Paul and Peter and John and Matthew that they didn't think the end times or the second coming was coming soon. Jesus literally says, some of you will not pass away before these things happen. And Revelation says that these things must soon take place and the time is near. I feel like you skip all over this topic to argue that the timing of the rapture, when really it seems very clear to me that all of the disciples were convinced that this was happening within their lifetime and maybe even did in AD 70, just as Jesus stated. So
well, first of all, Jesus never stated that. Let's knock that off the table right off the bat.
Well, no, he did actually. He did. I know what you're saying, Aaron, but I think what this person is saying is accurate, but it's not the story in Revelation. It's not the story that Jesus goes into when he talks about the end times. I don't want to be confusing here. Let me explain. Okay. So Jesus at the very beginning of Matthew chapter 24, which we all know, Matthew chapter 24 and 25, that's the Olivet Discourse. That's Jesus' great end times dissertation. He's standing there at the temple and the disciples are saying to him, hey, look how beautiful the temple is. And then Jesus says, I tell you the truth. Do you see? Oh, thank you. Yeah. If you want to go there, Sarah, is that you? Yeah, pull up Matthew chapter 24.
Share this tab instead. I pulled it up in the wrong tab. There you go.
Okay, thank you. This is important that the audience sees this, and it's tiny, so I hope people can zoom in. If you're on your phone, just turn your phone sideways. It'll help. So yeah, there you go. Zoom in. Oh, beautiful. Oh, you're so good at this. Okay. So check this out. So then Jesus went out and departed from the temple. His disciples came up to show him the buildings. Jesus said, do you not see all these things? Assuredly, I say to you that not one stone shall be left here upon another that shall not be thrown down. So I've been to Jerusalem. I've been to the Temple Mount quite a few times. And sure enough, on the southeast corner, there's this huge pile of boulders that the archaeologists dug out after the 1967 war, right? The Israeli archaeologists. And these are actually remnants. These are like chunks of the Second Temple buildings, not the temple itself, but the actual buildings that were up there, the royal stoa and all that. So what Jesus is prophesying here, 100% came true 39 years later in the year AD 70 when the Romans destroyed the holy temple. What's interesting is that then his disciples look what they assume in verse 3. They immediately jump into the end times. They say, tell us, when will these things be? What will be the sign of your coming, meaning your second coming, and the end of the age? I mean, there's no question here what they're asking him. When's this going to happen? When's the end of the world, right, as we call it, right, the end times. And then Jesus goes into his whole dissertation about the end times, right? But what's interesting is that Jesus makes that statement about the temple being destroyed, and then he goes into this whole thing, and then ends up in verse 15 where he talks about the abomination of desolation. If you go down to verse 15, the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel, standing in the holy place, right? So yeah, Aaron, it's not incorrect what this person stated, that Jesus did prophesy, but what he prophesied, he did prophesy the destruction of the second temple about 40 years later. But then he goes into his end times dissertation and talks about the future after that, talks about what they're asking about the end times.
I see the distinction, sure. Yeah.
Right. But this concept of must soon take place, the time is near, quickly, et cetera. Can I show you guys? I've got a couple of slides about this that kind of help to explain this, because it's not completely incorrect. Just bear with me for a second here.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say the language is another thing, that he mentioned. The comment about, these things will soon take place, so we'll have to talk about the timing as well. And also another question, if Nero is the Antichrist, did he cause, or did he, go into the temple and cause the abomination of desolation? That's another thing we want to look at.
And the short answer is 1,000% no, and we're going to prove that during this live stream. Okay, Nero 100% could not have been the ultimate Antichrist. Now listen, he was a type and shadow of the Antichrist. Of course, he was an archetype of the Antichrist. So was Antiochus Epiphanes, who did his thing back in the year 168 BC to 165 BC. So was Adolf Hitler was a major archetype of the Antichrist. I mean, come on, right? But no one in history has done, since the time of Christ, has done what the Antichrist is prophesied to do, and that's to sit in the temple. But we'll get to that part of our story, right? So Sarah, the person that you quoted, you said you weren't sure who it was. I think it might have been this gentleman. This is who I've been going back and forth with. So Bark Malasteri, whoever that is, on TikTok, and he says, "Yep, all distorted to hide the truth. That Jesus returned in AD 70. That's weird." And again, this guy seems to think that Jesus physically returned to Earth back then. I got to get the story on that. Then when the Roman Empire fell, history has been fulfilled, And here it is, right here, right? Isn't this what we just read? Gave him to show his servants things which must shortly take place. So first thing John said in the book of Revelation, 100%, that's Revelation chapters 1 through 3, right? And he sent and signified it to his servant John, right? Things which must shortly take place. And then we also see this, like he quotes down Revelation chapter 2, verse 16, I'm coming to you quickly. The third woe is coming quickly, right? We keep seeing the word quickly, right? One thing I want to point out here, this language, Aaron and I talked about this the other day, this language is not absolute. So somebody else somewhere, might have been the same guy in a different comment, was saying you can't ignore the timestamps. There are timestamps. These aren't timestamps. These are very, general, nebulous terms. Quickly does not, he doesn't say in 1 year this will happen, must shortly take place. Does that mean a month from now? Does that mean, a day from now? These are not timestamps. They're not specifying a specific time. So if I say to Pam, we're getting ready for church in the morning, and I say, when are you going to be ready to walk out the door? And she says soon. What does that mean? That probably means 45 minutes. Don't tell her I said that. But if you guys ask me, hey, Ryan, when do you plan to retire? And I say soon. Well, in that case, it might mean 5 years from now. So you see what I mean? These are not absolute terms.
So it's almost like, Jesus is like saying like quickly as in just be prepared. You know, when you see these things, right, that he already listed out for us in his end time dissertation, you know, we're to look up for your redemption draws near, right?
I don't doubt for a second that Jesus fully intended for his disciples, which includes the original 12 all the way up to us today, 2,000 years later, to always be looking and watching and to feel a sense of imminence. Okay, but what the real connotation is in all this is inevitability. This is going to happen. It's inevitable. It's coming. Be ready at all times. Do you know? Acts chapter 1. The disciples are up on the Mount of Olives. Jesus going to ascend, and they ask him again. When are you coming back? And he said, "It's is this the time you're going to come back and restore the kingdom?" And do you guys remember what Jesus said to him? He said, "It's not for you to know the times and the seasons. Just go out and do what I'm telling you to do." So it's always this. So if he had told those guys back then, don't worry, it's going to be 2,000 whole years before I come back and establish the manifest kingdom here on earth, would they have been as like enthusiastic to go up into northern, the northern Assyrian Empire and get killed for the gospel's sake? Maybe not, right? There's always supposed to be a feeling of imminence. Now, all that said, the audience, if you're a preterist right now, you're saying, "Oh my gosh, these guys are dancing. They're obfuscating. This is all smoke and mirrors." Check this out. Zephaniah. Can I go through this, you guys? Is this cool?
Please.
I want to show this to you. Okay.
Oh, definitely.
Zephaniah. So the prophet Zephaniah wrote his book in about the year 625 BC. Okay, so we're talking more than 6 centuries before the time of Christ. So if for the preterists all the end times prophecy stuff took place around the year AD 70, well, let's kind of test that. Again, this was written 700 years before AD 70, this book. So Zephaniah, he talks about the great day of the Lord. Now, I don't know of a Bible scholar, quote unquote, that does not consider the day of the Lord to be referring to the second coming of Christ. That's when Christ comes back. That's God's final judgment upon this world. And even preterists, I think, probably would agree with that. The day of the Lord refers to the second coming, the final judgment, God's wrath, which again, they would place in the year AD 70. Okay, but let's look at this, okay? So verse 2, God says, "I will utterly consume everything from the face of the land." Has that ever happened? Okay, we could say, well, maybe it just means around Israel. Let's keep reading. "I will consume man and beast, the birds of the heavens, the fish of the sea, and the stumbling blocks along with the wicked." Let me see if I can move this thing. Hold on. Yeah, perfect. Okay. "I will cut off man from the face of the land." It's sounding kind of eschatological, I think. And again, when I say eschatological for us, that means today. For the preterists, that means 2,000 years ago. Let's keep reading. "Therefore, wait for me." And this is, I think, still in chapter 1. "Therefore, wait for me until the day I rise up for plunder. My determination is to gather the nations to my assembly of kingdoms, to pour on them my indignation." The nations, plural, right? That's like the whole world. "All my fierce anger, all the earth shall be devoured with the fire of my jealousy." This is sounding eschatological, isn't it?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
You guys with me still?
Yep.
Okay, this is content, but we're reading God's word. That's important. "For then I will restore the peoples a pure language, that they may all call on the name of the Lord, to serve him with one accord." This sounds like the millennial reign to me, okay? "The Lord has taken away your judgments. He has cast out your enemy. The King of Israel, the Lord, is in your midst. You shall see," what I highlighted in green, "you shall see disaster no more." What does no more mean? That means forever.
Mm-hmm.
The King of Israel, I'm going to say, is in your midst. That means like physically among you. I'm going to say that's probably referring to Christ coming back, the second coming, ruling and reigning. Okay.
Yeah, physically.
I don't think I'm like grasping at straws here. I think this is so clear. This is what Zephaniah is writing about, the second coming. Okay. "In that day it shall be said to Jerusalem, do not fear. Zion, let not your hands be weak. The Lord your God is in your midst. The mighty one will save. He will rejoice over you with gladness. He will quiet you with his love. Rejoice over you with singing." Now let's look at this from the preterist standpoint. When did all this take place? What is Zephaniah prophesying here? When did this event take place according to preterism?
Well, again, it depends on what kind of preterist, right? So some preterists think that the The only thing in prophecy that hasn't happened yet is the second coming. 2,000-year gap between the fulfillment of everything except for the second coming. But then for this other kind of in the minority, I feel like preterists who think that everything already happened, including the second coming.
Yeah,
So,
I'm not sure. I'm not sure like how.
So for
What's
the first group, I think this is okay, right? You can coexist with this peacefully if you believe that the second coming is still in the future, even if everything else already happened. Antichrist came and went, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're in that kind of minority of preterists who think that it all happened, including the second coming, yeah, you're going to have a difficult time explaining how the Jews being scattered to the winds and the
but here
Holocaust
and
and
here's actually what I'm honing. Yeah, here's actually what I'm honing in on though, is the word quickly. Okay, so like you see my title on the slide there. What does quickly mean? Because you remember what that gentleman in the comment said. He said, well, what about all the times and when Jesus said quickly or soon or at hand,
okay.
and then in Revelation, behold, I'm coming quickly. So the point I'm getting at here is what does quickly actually mean in prophecy in the Bible, right? So here, let's just get to it. Okay. Be silent in the presence of the Lord.
Good. Oh, good. You were scaring me. I thought, wait, I don't see the word quickly. Is Ryan stumbling?
I know you got it. Yeah, sorry. I've got I got so much. It's got to be on 3 different
Yeah,
slides.
you buried your lead. Okay, go ahead.
I know. I got to stop doing that. Be silent in the presence of the Lord, for the day of the Lord is at hand.
I love this, Ryan. Oh,
That's
good
a,
fun.
it's yeah.
Oh,
That's
good
another. Yeah, it's another term that the preterists just latch
Oh,
onto. Well, what
wow.
about when he says the kingdom of heaven is at hand? That means it has to have been that generation within a few years. It had to be Jesus' time. Well, this is written 700 years before
This
the time of Christ.
this is a good find, yeah, because now
Yeah.
a preterist has to say, well, 2,000 years is longer than 700 years, right?
Yeah, I mean,
It could be
right?
700
It's
years later, and that still qualifies as quickly or at hand. It just can't be 2,000 years later,
yeah, it's
which
right.
of
It
course
doesn't
is
hold
water. That's a
water,
very good
right?
find. Yeah, I
So
like this. Good job.
so the great day of the Lord is near. So we have at hand, we have near, and it hastens quickly. So there we have 3 terms that the preterists love to point to. Look, Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Look in Revelation, behold, I'm coming quickly. That all must mean it, unless
I think
Jesus is a liar, it has to be, that at that moment in that
Sarah,
generation.
Sarah, what do you think? You don't seem excited enough, Sarah. Did you not?
I'm just reading a little bit about it. So there's a primary near-term fulfillment of this prophecy, as the day of the Lord was the Babylonian conquest of Judah and the destruction of Jerusalem in 586 BC. So
Which
this
is
would
why I'm
be an
showing
art. Oh, go ahead.
right. Well, I was gonna say, which is why I'm showing this other stuff that Aaron kind of, latched onto, a minute ago. And if you look at like, Bible commentaries on this, everybody says, yes, this was, kind of like leading up to the Babylonian captivity, but ultimately it's eschatological because
Mhm.
you've got all this stuff. The noise of the day of the Lord is bitter. The mighty men shall cry out. It's a day of wrath, day of trouble. But especially this part here, I probably should have flipped those 2 slides. The Lord has taken away your judgments, verse 15. He has cast out your enemy. The King of Israel is in your midst. You shall see disaster no more. So Zephaniah really is ultimately, it's eschatological. He's describing God's ultimate conquering of all of Israel's enemies, and the Jews are going to live forever in the land safely. There'll be disaster no more.
And we
So
see patterns too. So we see like a partial fulfillment or something that seems like it, and then it happens again, and then there's an ultimate fulfillment.
right.
And right. So
So I mean, we could say, okay, so this isn't a slam dunk for our side per se, but certainly it just
but the
gives some
consumed
weakness to these
the
words here.
the portion where it talks about, like the baptism of fire, right? We know that there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth in, after the millennial reign of Christ.
Right.
And so this is what it sounds like, what was the scripture where it said consumed by the fire of
Oh,
his
I think
jealousy? I don't, his
right there,
indignation.
bottom of verse 8. All the earth shall be devoured with the fire of my jealousy. Right. My determinants
Yeah.
to gather the nations, plural. So
Yeah.
so again,
Interesting.
I mean, most Bible scholars, in fact, all that I could find, my actual paper Bible, I still have one of those, Spirit-Filled Life Bible. They all say what I think I see here, which is that this is ultimately eschatological. So it's really describing, the end times, what we call the end times. And again, the main point here is not like what exact period of time this is describing, but the meanings of these terms: at hand, near, quickly, like how strong is the argument that these mean it has to be that generation, or is it just in God's terms? A day of the Lord is as 1,000 years to God, 1,000 years as a day, right?
This
is not our strongest argument, you guys.
Here's a comment from Greg. The 1,000-year reign of Christ happened already. Now we're in Satan's little season since 1776. Do you know what Satan's little season is about?
I don't know, and I saw Greg's request earlier to talk about that. So, Greg, you would be helping us a ton, and we could look it up later, of course, if you could tell us what Satan's little season is. And since 1776, that's interesting.
Does he mean Satan being released from being imprisoned at the end of the millennium?
Well, so Greg, I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say that you're a partial, not just a partial preterist, but a post-millennialist, because you're saying that the 1,000-year reign of Christ happened already. So that would make you a post-millennialist. Whereas the three of us here talking, we're premillennialists. We think this is all future. And we need to keep going because I feel like our strongest arguments have not even begun to be made yet.
No, that was good. That was good. I mean, the idea of quickly, and that was 700 years before Jesus was even born and
right
came for his first coming. So
even if the second coming happened when the preterists say, the full preterists, or kind of the end time story in general, that still puts it 700 years before, using that kind of language: quickly, at hand, near.
Right.
So I'm just saying, when we see those words, don't jump on it and assume that has to mean like, that generation or within the next couple of years. It could mean like way off in the future. It just means imminent. It means, or more than that, it means inevitable, is what I'm saying. No, we got so much more to throw at this, and we're already 45 minutes in.
There's a lot. Okay, so this was a comment, kind of a more of a narrow comment on believing that the Antichrist was Nero. So she says, I believe that the Antichrist was not a future end time figure, but a first century historical one, specifically Nero Caesar, and that most of the book of Revelation was fulfilled in the events leading up to and including the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. Revelation repeatedly states that the prophecies would occur soon, shortly, and again, at that the time is at hand, language that would have had real meaning for the original audience living under Roman persecution. Nero fits a biblical description of the beast more accurately than any modern figure until now, perhaps. The beast is more, he was a brutal ruler who viciously persecuted Christians, demanded loyalty, ruled the known world at the time. Most notably, the number of the beast, 666, corresponds exactly to Nero Caesar when calculated using the Hebrew gematria, a method understood by early Jewish Christians. Revelation is also places responsibility for the blood of the prophets and the saints on Jerusalem, and aligns Jesus' declaration that the judgment would fall on that generation, culminating in the Roman destruction of the temple in AD 70. So when read in its historical and cultural context, Revelation is not speculative blueprint of future events, but a prophetic message of a covenant judgment, Christ's victory, and the establishment of his kingdom in history.
Okay. So we've already kind of talked a little bit about this, right? And we haven't gotten the temple yet, so important, but the stuff about like, what does the language of like, quickly, soon, near, really mean? Does that really mean like, within the next few years, whatever, right? Has to be that generation. I'm saying no, but there's a whole lot more to this. All right. So let me, and I'm going to have to just kind of like, throw out a question on my own behalf here because I don't think it's going to come up organically here. But I think this idea, and it was kind of like buried in that comment that you just showed, Sarah, about the idea of the if you want to, yeah, I think it's the second slide that talks about the kingdom is at hand.
Mm-hmm.
It's the one before that. This is important. Yeah, actually, the way that she puts it here is the time is at hand, right? So there is a verse in Scripture, and Aaron, you just sent me a purple puppet TikTok about this the other day. There is a verse in Scripture where Jesus says, he says, listen, you guys, this generation will not, there are some standing here who will not pass away. I forget the way he says it, until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom, which sounds so much like the second coming, right? And he says, there's one standing here who will not die until they see this event, right? So this is another very, very strong preterist argument. So I'm kind of like throwing the argument up for us, but is it okay if I share my screen again, you guys?
Go for it.
I want to address this one. Okay, it's super important. Okay, you can see my screen?
Oh.
Yes.
Okay, so here's another thing, kind of along the same.
Do it again.
The share screen.
Did it go away here? How about that? Can you see it?
No.
You can't. That's so weird. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna have to share again.
I'm sorry. Try it now.
Okay.
No.
We got this, everybody. Okay.
Try it now.
We got
Try
this.
it now.
Okay.
It shares to the screen that we're on.
Okay. There it is.
Okay.
Ryan.
Okay, good. So this is kind of along the same lines as like, what does quickly mean? But this is different. This is a much stronger preterist argument, really a strong one, very strong. So here's what it is. So Matthew 4:17, for example, and this is not the only place where we see this statement made. From that time, Jesus began to preach and say, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. So the idea of at hand there is it's very, very close. It's like, any minute. Again, it's this idea of, this generation, right? It's like right here. Here's one challenge to that interpretation, though, that it means it's the very near future. Matthew 11:12, and from the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven suffers violence, and the violent take it by force. So that almost says something different. Like, well, what is Jesus saying here? Like, because this is both Jesus talking. He's saying the kingdom of heaven is here now. It sounds like, doesn't it? From the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven. Okay. So my question, if you see the big title on the top of the slide, is the term kingdom of heaven eschatological, meaning talking about the second coming of Christ. Okay. Now look at this. This is hard for us three because we're trying to debunk preterism. Matthew 16:28, Jesus says, assuredly I say to you, there are some standing here who shall not taste death till they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
That's hard. Okay, because if that's true, the guy standing there, that was the disciples he's talking to, and he's saying they're going to see before they die the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. If that's referring to the second coming, then that's a big point in favor of preterism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay.
But you and I talked about this, Ryan. What does it mean to be coming in his kingdom? So, but I'm not going to steal your thunder. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Does coming in his kingdom equate to the second coming? That's one of the questions.
Yeah. Go look at the original Greek, and in could also be translated. It's a preposition. It could also be translated into, and I think that's the correct translation. I know it is. You will see the Son of Man coming into his kingdom. That means something different. Now watch this. Immediately, the very next verse, and we added chapters and verses just 500 years ago. So when this was written 2,000 years ago, there were no chapters, no verses. So this is not a completely different track here. It's the same story continuing. The very next thing that happens, now after 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John, led them up on a high mountain by themselves. Been there, that's Mount Tabor in northern Israel. And Jesus was transfigured before them. So where are they right now? The Mount of Transfiguration. Okay. Jesus' face shone like the sun. His clothes became as white as light. And behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to them physically, by the way, talking with Jesus. Then Peter answered and said to Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, let us make here 3 tabernacles, da, da, da. And then this is interesting, and make sure I don't lose the screen here. Can you still see the screen?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So verse 5, while he was still speaking, meaning Peter, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and suddenly a voice came out of the cloud saying, this is my beloved son, in whom I am well pleased. Hear him. Now, this is about 3 years after John baptized Jesus, right? John the Baptist. Do you guys remember what happened when John baptized Jesus?
Yeah, the heavens open, and they heard a voice say,
this is my son, in whom I'm well pleased.
Well pleased, right?
And that was
Voice
it
from heaven. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and what's the difference here with what the voice that comes out of the cloud 3 years later?
Hear him. Hear
Yeah,
him.
this little thing is added. Hear him, listen to him. Something has changed here, and of course, this is the most bizarre event in the entire story of Jesus. They go up on this mountain, and Moses and Elijah show up physically and have this conversation, and then this voice out of the clouds, right? So this something is happening here that's monumental. Now, watch this. This is very complex. I'm not going to go into great detail here, but this is the 70 weeks prophecy from Daniel chapter 9. Okay. And what this prophecy is about is 490 years of history, non-contiguous, by the way, are going to take place. And at the end of that, see in verse 24, at the end of that, the Jews, it's talking about here, because it says your people, your holy city, will anoint the most holy. That means that they will once and for all accept Yeshua as the true Christ, that's Jesus, as the true Mashiach, the Messiah, their king. And that's going to happen at the very end of the 70th week, which we all believe has not happened yet. But the first 69 weeks have happened, and this is a preterist argument. They're like, well, why is there a 2,000-year gap? Okay, it's another topic we probably won't have time to get to today. But
I actually have a good short answer for that. I don't think.
Okay, so I'll make my point, and then you can share that. That'd be great. So verse 25, know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem, that was the decree given to Nehemiah by the Medo-Persian king Artaxerxes I, okay, until Messiah the Prince, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. Don't get a calculator, that's 69 weeks, okay? So, but the point I want to make here, though, there's so much going on in these 4 verses. The point I want to make, see the part that I have highlighted in like bright yellow? Okay, until Messiah the Prince. Well, Messiah the Prince is a person, it's not an event. So how do you do until? You see what I'm saying? So it says until Messiah the Prince, almost like Messiah, and not almost like Messiah the Prince is an event. It's the moment when the Messiah officially becomes the Messiah. Okay. And by the way, if you count forward, so 69 weeks, that's 176,400 days. Okay, that'd be 483 years divided by 360 days per year. Very, very long story. I don't want to get too complicated here. Too late, right? But I've actually really done the work on this. It took me quite a long time. And if you count forward from the day that decree was issued to rebuild the wall and the street to Nehemiah, that was on the first day of the Hebrew month of Nisan in the Gregorian year 445 BC, and you can't count forward exactly 173,400 days. I'm probably remembering the numbers not quite right there. You actually land on a date precisely 2 weeks before Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem when he was crucified. Guess what date that probably is? It's an insanely good fit. It's the Mount of Transfiguration event.
Yeah, it's the date of the Transfiguration, right?
Right.
Yeah,
so the moment.
And Messiah the Prince, I mean, it jumps out as, when we think about words like, prince, princess, queen, king, it's language having to do with a kingdom.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, it
exactly.
jumps out as being, an indicator, hey, this has to do with the kingdom. Right.
Right. So back to this, what is Jesus saying? He's saying there are some saying here who shall not taste death till they see the Son of Man coming into his kingdom, according to the Archangel Gabriel way back in the book of Daniel, 600 years earlier. that's a specific moment when Jesus becomes Messiah the Prince, and that date precisely lands on the Mount of Transfiguration event. That's what Jesus is saying. He's saying you're going to see me officially become Messiah the Prince. And then that's the very next event in the narrative, right? Okay,
Yeah.
so you were going to say something, Aaron? I'm going on and on.
Oh yeah, the 69 weeks, why is there a 2,000-year gap between the 69th week? Because all those are contiguous, right? I mean, everyone in eschatology recognizes, whether they're a preterist or futurist or whatever, they recognize that the 69 weeks were contiguous. But then what about the 70th week? Is it true that it didn't happen like the preterists say? Well, the idea, what we think is, and this isn't, we didn't come up with this originally. Later, I discovered that it's kind of a rampant, widespread idea. The idea is that at the end of the 69 weeks, which is when Christ was crucified, I think that ended the 69 weeks. Is that right? Is that right, Ryan? What was the event that ended the 69 weeks?
The event that ended the 69 weeks was actually the moment that he became Messiah the Prince. It's the Mount of Transfiguration event. But then it does say afterward that he's cut off, but not for his own sake, describing his crucifixion.
Right.
Immediately after that.
Yeah. So from our perspective, that and what I'm sorry, what's the term for Christians who believe that the Jews are no longer the chosen people, but
Replacement
Christians?
theology.
Replacement theology, yeah. So what I'm about to say even fits with that group, even though we're not members of that group. We're not replacement theologists at all. But what happened in that moment was that the lens of history shifted off of the Jewish nation, off of Jerusalem, off of the Jews. They're still God's chosen people, but suddenly the lens of history shifted off of them onto the Christians, the Gentiles, primarily, right? Also some Jews became Christian, right? But no longer the Jewish faith, the Jewish nationality, ethnicity, the physical.
We went from Old Covenant to New Covenant, maybe is a good way of saying
That's
it.
another way of putting it, yeah. But I think that lens of what is happening in the kingdom of God, it shifts off of Israel at that moment. 69 weeks are over, right? For the next 2,000 years, if we're right about the timing, that lens is now on the body of Christ, the Christians, right? It's our time. Everything's about us now. All the dynamics and activities in the spiritual realm, from God's perspective, have to do with the body of Christ, his people, the Christians, not the Jews, right? But at the end, according to Revelation and Daniel and other prophetic books, at the end, right before Jesus comes back, right? So let's say 7 years before Jesus comes back, suddenly God's focus shifts back to his people, the people that he made a promise to in the time of Abraham, right? So those 69 weeks, the 2,000-year gap, is when God's eyes are off of his chosen people, but they go back. They do go back. Why? Because he promised Abraham,
the 2,000-year gap. Yeah.
Yeah, I will not forsake my covenant with the Jews, the ethnic, even religious Jews. I do not forsake my covenant with them. In the end, all Jews will be saved. But my eyes are not focused on them for 2,000 years until right before Christ comes back. And that's when the 70th week suddenly begins, is when God's eyes turn back to his chosen people. By the way, 70th week, a week is 7 years prophetically. That's the 7-year Daniel treaty, the Great Tribulation, or what we call it. Okay, go ahead.
It is. That is the context. Yeah, no, I was going to say what you're saying is insanely biblical. It's spot on. In fact, there are terms in the Old Testament and the New Testament that imply that there's this whole period where God's focus is on the Gentiles, right, away from the Jews. So it talks about until the time of the Gentiles is fulfilled. Can't remember the book and verse. That term, until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. I mean, it's very clear, especially the first one, the time of the Gentiles is fulfilled. So there is a time of the Gentiles. Do you know that the early church fathers 100% backed up that notion of the 2,000-year gap? Do you know that even the Talmud does, the Jewish Talmud, Jewish belief? And I have talked to my rabbi friends. I have like many rabbi friends, half a dozen, several of them like full Orthodox. And they acknowledge that, like, there is this 2,000-year period that coincidentally happens to start at the time of that guy that you guys talk about, Jesus, right? They acknowledge it.
Yeah,
coincidentally started 2,000 years ago.
It's not related to Jesus. I think they probably related just to the destruction of the temple. I don't know.
So you're talking specifically about Daniel's prophecy, his 69-week prophecy and the
So
70th week.
So that's what we're relating it to, Sarah,
Mhm.
is that the 69th week ended when Jesus became Messiah, the Prince,
right?
on the Mount of Transfiguration. The 70th week still has not started yet. That's when the 7-year peace treaty is signed, which is described in Daniel chapter 9, verse 27. So we are still in this crazy 2,000-year gap. And why the heck would there be a 2,000-year gap? I'm gonna go out of order here.
But the Jews, they name a 6,000-year period broken into 3 chunks: the first 2,000 years, second 2,000 years, which ended around the time of Christ, and then the last 2,000 years, which we're coming to the end of now. How do they refer to those 3 2,000-year periods again?
Let's. You guys want to take a look at it, because I actually have it in my notes. Do you want to see?
Yes.
This is cool. This is cool. Yeah, and I'm going way out of order in my notes, which I need to get in the habit of doing because we need to have an organic conversation here. Okay. Yeah. Watch this. And listen, audience, just bear with us. I have a lot on the screen here. This is from other presentations I've done, but this is amazing. Just watch this. Okay. So, and you guys know me, I got to kind of like fill in the story here, right? So, let's see. So the context here, I'm talking about Irenaeus. I can see at the top of the slide here. Irenaeus, and let's go to here. Hold on. Irenaeus was the disciple of a guy named Polycarp, who was the disciple of John the Apostle himself, who wrote the book of Revelation, who was a disciple, of course, of Jesus. In fact, according to John, he was Jesus' favorite disciple. I'll go on with that. He certainly was the only one that God left alive long enough to like actually write the book of Revelation. He's the only one of the 12 that didn't get martyred, right? Anyway, Saint Irenaeus, let's just call him Irenaeus, okay? Irenaeus is directly in the line of apostolic succession from John. So the Catholic Church makes a really big deal about how the Pope is in the apostolic line of succession from Peter. Well, John was a disciple too. Again, in some ways, Jesus' favorite disciple, apparently, right? And he had a line of disciples. Irenaeus was in that line. In the year 180, he wrote this book called Against Heresies. It is amazing. Talk about shedding insight into what John actually means by the book of Revelation. And we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves here. That's okay. So I had this question: did Irenaeus believe that his was the last generation? So again, he's writing in the year 180. So here's the thing. I'm not going to go into great detail here. It's on the screen. But a contemporary of Irenaeus, meaning living in the exact same time, in the exact same place, was a Jewish rabbi named Yosef ben Halafta, okay? And his tomb is still up in the northern Galilee. You can see a picture of it right there on the top. And at the same time that Irenaeus was doing his work, this neighbor of his, who was also hiding from the Romans in Asia Minor, right? He actually set out to calculate how many years it had been back to Adam and Eve. And what he determined is that the time in the time of Irenaeus, it had been about 4,000 years since the time of Adam and Eve. Did you get that?
Yes.
And that's where we get the date today, by the way. So we all say, it's 6,000 in our time, in the year 2026. It's been about 6,000 years since Adam and Eve. This is the first guy that we know of to calculate it, Rabbi Joseph ben Halafta. Irenaeus' neighbor. Did Irenaeus know about his numbers? Probably, possibly. Okay. Other famous guys who have done this calculation over the centuries includes Maimonides. Let's not talk about him. Martin Luther, we know, Protestant Reformation, right? Sir Isaac Newton, ever hear of him? Johannes Kepler, et cetera, right? So in the time of Irenaeus, how many years had it been since Adam and Eve?
4,000.
4,000 years. Very good. Okay. Now look at what Irenaeus writes. This is what he writes. He says, "For in as many days as this world was made, in which is how many days? 6 days.
6 days, yeah.
In so many thousand years it shall be concluded." So how many years until it's concluded? 6,000 years.
Yeah.
He's saying in the same number of days it took to make the world, in that many thousand years it'll be concluded. So Irenaeus did not believe that the end times, the second coming, the fulfillment of the book of Revelation would take place until 2,000 years after his time. So Irenaeus didn't believe that his was the last generation. Okay. Now, did the disciples think that Jesus would come back in their generation? Sure, they probably did. By the time of Irenaeus, apparently not. And here's what he says. He says, "Thus the heaven and the earth will be finished, all their dormant, and God brought to a conclusion upon the sixth day, and God rested on the seventh day. This is an account of the things formerly created, and is also a prophecy of what is to come. For the day of the Lord is as 1,000 years, and in 6 days created things were completed. It is evident, therefore, that they will come to an end at the 6,000th year." It's so clear. That's pretty cool, right?
So Irenaeus was saying that it would be roughly 2,000 years from his time, which
From
is
his
our
time,
right.
which was about the time of Christ. He was writing about 100 years after the time of Christ, right?
So I'm gonna emphasize some things that you just said, Ryan, for the preterists or people kind of grappling with it. Irenaeus, once again, was the disciple of Polycarp, who was the disciple of John, who wrote Revelation. So, if John knew or intended that the beast was Nero, certainly Irenaeus would have known that, but that's not the way Irenaeus characterizes it. Irenaeus writes in his fifth book, especially of Against Heresies, the fifth book is all Revelation, right? All of Irenaeus' teachings on Revelation, and it's always futurist. He never once says, "Oh, this already happened," in the time of Nero. This doesn't refer to the destruction of the Second Temple. So, to be a preterist, I think you have to completely throw Irenaeus out. How can you do that?
Well, you would have to throw the disciples' testimony out too in a lot of cases. I mean,
Right.
John, if it was Nero, or Nero was ruling at that time, they would have said so, right?
Unless John wrote it in 65 AD, for which there is zero evidence. All the evidence is that he wrote it between 90 and 95 AD. So,
and let's look at that too. We're going to get to that for sure. So, but so the point, and Aaron just made it. I'm going to say it again just for emphasis, that Irenaeus, as you can see on the screen there, was the disciple of Polycarp, who was the disciple learned directly from John the Apostle. If anyone would have had expertise on what John meant by the book of Revelation, I think it would be Polycarp, who would then pass it along to Irenaeus. I mean, if John meant the book of Revelation to be a historical text talking about events, that happened in AD 70, would Irenaeus, just 2 generations removed from him, right? The disciple, would he be that confused and get it so wrong? By the way, Polycarp, most of his writings have been lost to history, but the few that are out there, like his epistle to the Philippians, it's very clear that he was also a futurist, and there was no debating it. Polycarp didn't say, well, John kind of thought he was writing about history, but I know it was about the future. I mean, come on. These guys said this is all stuff in the future, no mincing words, right? So LeafCat07 just commented in our comments, it's not clear if all believers would believe in unison. In other words, did all the other believers believe what Irenaeus believed? Irenaeus, this is an important point, LeafCat, you make an important point. Irenaeus also claimed that Jesus lived to be 50 years old. That is true. Irenaeus also has some weird stuff. He seemed to be kind of anti-Semitic, which I don't agree with, okay? So, but here's the distinction. In some of Irenaeus's writings in this book, Against Heresies, Irenaeus is presenting his own views, his own theories, his own ideas, right? And some might very well be off. I think he's wrong about Jesus living to be 50, right? That doesn't seem to match the other, accounts that we have, right? But in the cases where Irenaeus is just repeating what he's learned, from Polycarp, from John, he, how could he get it that wrong, right? Thinking that, okay, John meant all this stuff to be historical, but here I'm just going to say that it's all in the future, right? And again, Polycarp said the same thing. Polycarp put all these events in a future tense. Why would Polycarp do that if wouldn't John have said to him, "Hey, I'm writing, this is a book of history," right? Anyways, yeah. So Irenaeus, I'm not saying that all of his theology is 100% correct. He doesn't even write it that way. When he writes about Jesus living to be 50, he kind of writes it like, "Hey, this is just a weird idea. I was just thinking this, and this." So we can dismiss some of what Irenaeus says. I think I would call him certainly, history's most legitimate, credible witness of what John meant by the book of Revelation. Now that said, This is a point I want to get here, right? So LeafCat07 says it's not clear if all believers would believe like Irenaeus did, and I think LeafCat, what you're referring to is this idea that Revelation is about the future, that all the stuff in Revelation is going to take place in the future. Well, watch this. I'm going to share my screen again, you guys. Is that cool? Oh, actually, I guess I'm already sharing it, but I'm going to go to a different slide. Can you guys see the slide?
We're still looking at
It's on the same slide. Okay, so here I got to do this different. Bear with me. Got to fast forward. Right here. Okay, so here we go. These are all the early church fathers, and when I say all, I'm not a there was more than this, but these are like the most prominent ones. Let me just say this bluntly: there was not a single early church father who was a preterist up until maybe Eusebius, who was writing in about the year AD 320. So something like 300 years after the time of Christ. Eusebius, listen to when you read Eusebius, 300 years later, right? So, and he was not in an apostolic line of succession. Eusebius had not learned from someone who had learned from someone who had learned directly from the disciples. He was just a guy. He was a prominent figure. He was at the Council of Nicaea, and even in his writings, what he more said, okay, what it was more along the lines of was look, this stuff, kind of had an early fulfillment in the destruction of the Second Temple in AD 70. The first true preterists did not come along until the 1500s. Okay, but check this out. So the epistle of Barnabas. These are some of the early church fathers. He wrote, "In 6,000 years, the Lord shall bring all things to an end. For the day with him signifies and he rests on the seventh day." So Barnabas, early church father, said the same thing as Irenaeus, that it'd be 2,000 years in his future before the end times would take place, the second coming, etc. Right? Hippolytus, I'm probably mispronouncing his name, in the year AD 205, shortly after Irenaeus, the Sabbath is a type of future kingdom for a day of the Lord. Since then, in 6 days, God created all things. It follows that in 6,000 years, all will be fulfilled. It wasn't just Irenaeus who believed this. Commodianus, I'm mispronouncing him, a few years later, we will be immortal when the 6,000 years are completed. What's immortal? He means the physical resurrection of the righteous dead, or for us, the rapture. He wrote again, resurrection of the body will be when the 6,000 years are completed. Now, by this time, surely these guys knew the timeline. They knew it had only been about 4,000 years since Adam and Eve. So they're looking to 2,000 years into their future, which, by the way, would be exactly our time. They're looking at like the year 2026, hypothetically, right? Victorinus, I got to learn how to pronounce these names. Satan will be bound until the 1,000 years are finished. That is after the 6th day. Same thing, 6,000 years. Methodius, AD 290. For I also taking my journey, celebrate with Christ the millennium of rest, which is called the 7th day, even the true Sabbath. The 7th day, the 7th millennium. He's saying the same thing. Lactantius, I'm sure, Aaron, you're going to have to correct me on these. AD 305.
Lactantius? I don't know. You're doing fine.
The 6,000 years not yet complete. When this number is complete, the consummation must take place. He's saying we're not there yet, but when we get to 6,000 years after Adam and Eve, this is exciting to me. This is insane, right? And even Saint Jerome, who penned the Latin Vulgate, where we get the rapture concept, right? The word rapture, in AD 393. So he was writing even later than Eusebius. And he said, I believe that in this place, 1,000 years are commonly taken for a day, because this world, having been made in 6 days, it is believed that it will last only 6,000 years. He wrote that decades after Eusebius kind of maybe alluded to some preterist thoughts. And St. Jerome clearly, who was a more prominent figure than Eusebius, by the way, clearly was a futurist. So what was the gentleman's name who made that comment? Something Cat. And
you're muted, Sarah.
Yeah, LeafCat07. So you see the point, LeafCat, that no, it wasn't just Irenaeus, that all the early church fathers apparently, and I've read most of them, I'm not going to claim to have read all of them. If you go to newadvent.org, you can access all these early writings, right, easily. And I've read a bunch of it, and my intention is to read all of it, right? But as far as I've been able to tell in my research over many years, there is not one early church father who did not believe that the end times, that the fulfillment of the book of Revelation would take place until 2,000 years in their future, which is our time.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting, right?
So the question that we want to ask, was Nero the Antichrist?
One more thing, and we will 100% get to that because it's so important. And, guys, I don't know about you, but I'm not going to stop until we're done with this because this is important, and I don't want to feel like we left any stone unturned here. If you guys are cool with that, it's already 4:15, but Arizona time. Okay, so this is in the Talmud, the Jewish Talmud. So this is the, I think this is the Babylonian Talmud. It might be the Jerusalem Talmud, and this is just part of it. And the Talmud was compiled between 300 and 400 years after the time of Christ. So this is Jewish thought, even all the way, hundreds of years after the time of Christ. And look what they say right here. The school of Eliyahu, and I researched this thoroughly. I asked my rabbi friends, this literally means the prophet Elijah, okay, that the prophet Elijah taught 6,000 years as the duration of the world. This is what you were referring to earlier, Aaron. 2,000 of the 6,000 years are characterized by chaos. So that's there were 2,000 years between Adam and Eve and Moses. And that during that time, the Jews say that was a period of chaos. The next 2,000 years are the period of Torah. That's from Moses to, coincidentally, the time of Christ, right? Because Moses lived 2,000 years before Christ. From the era of the patriarchs until the end of the Mishnaic period, okay? And then watch this. This is the 2,000 years, according to Jewish thought, okay, who don't even believe that Jesus is the Messiah, that between the time of Christ and our time today, this 2,000-year period, and 2,000 years are the period of the coming of the Messiah, the coming of the Mashiach. And I asked my rabbi friends, what happened? Why do according to Elijah, then the Messiah was supposed to have shown up 2,000 years ago, coincidentally about the time that this guy named Yeshua showed up, Jesus, right? And they say, well, no, Jesus wasn't the Messiah. The reason that the Messiah still hasn't shown up is because this is literally what they say, because there's not unity among Jews. But if the Jews could just get along better, then the Messiah would have shown up. But look at,
sometimes they talk about like a Messiah for every generation, right? It's kind of more of a thought, not an actual one person until the very end, something along those lines.
But the point being that even according to Jewish thought, who don't even believe in Jesus as the Messiah, that it's exactly 6,000 years between Adam and Eve and, I don't know, the end times, what we call the end times, which puts us precisely at today, the year 2026. Hey, I got to step away for 1 second. So you guys have a nice talk. I'll be right back.
All right. Sure. So Aaron, I do have a question for you because you have taught on this. We shared your video on the number 666. And so let's, so Surfing Airwaves, in response to our Oklahoma Barndo girl who shared this comment with us, Surfing Airwaves, he says, I've checked Nero out before in depth, but to believe that Revelation already happened, we have no historical input of 666 on the forehead or the right hand to buy or sell. Nero never ruled the whole world, and he died and stayed dead. The second coming never happened. If Nero was the Antichrist, we're living in a time where everything promised never happened. And so let's talk about the 666.
Okay, sure. First, there's so many great indicators that Nero couldn't have been the Antichrist. One off the top of my head is that it was said that the Antichrist, I think Daniel, the Antichrist would be somehow related to the tribe of Dan. Well, Nero wasn't. He wasn't any part Jewish. Would come from the region of Assyria. Nero didn't. He came from, Italy, basically, right? But a really great one for us is the number 666, and it's one that preterists actually jump on, seize on, and use as like their kind of like slam dunk or pièce de résistance, and that is that the name Nero equals 666. Now, it kind of does. If you use the name Neron Kaiser, right, then it does equate to 666 if you calculate it through the Hebrew gematria. Couple of problems with that, all right, and they're not fatal problems. The fatal problem is going to be at the end of what I'm about to say. The first kind of problem that's not quite fatal is that Neron Kaiser is when you take the Latin way of saying Nero and run it through Hebrew, then because they would, or run it through, I think it's Hebrew, they would add I might be getting the languages wrong, they would add an N at the end if it was a male. Ryan, is that correct?
Something like that, yeah.
N because the masculine form has an N, so then it becomes Neron Kaiser. It was used among, I'd have to look at my notes, but it was basically that form would not have been current in John's audience. John's audience was Greek-speaking people in the eastern part of the empire. Greek-speaking people. In fact, he wrote Revelation in Greek, right? Just like, most of the New Testament was written in Greek. Okay, so that makes it weird off the bat, right? Why is he using a Latin form funneled through Hebrew to point to Nero? And a lot of people will say, well, he was doing it to stay undercover, right? He didn't want it known that he was doing this, so he made it kind of a maze that you had to go through, right? Fair enough. Okay, Hebrew gematria also not fatal. Fair enough, right? The Hebrews, there's a method that they use to take numbers and convert them into a name and vice versa, and it's called the gematria. It's done by the Hebrews. This does begin to fall apart, though, when we look again at Irenaeus, and Irenaeus had a few flaws, right? By the way, when Irenaeus said, yeah, Jesus died around age 50, what Irenaeus was jumping on was the verse, I think, in the book of John, where I think it was the Sanhedrin or some Pharisees or someone, they said, hey, Jesus, how could you have known Abraham? You're not yet 50. So that's what Irenaeus grabbed onto. Okay. And it was a mistake. Irenaeus was not infallible. Otherwise he would be, he would be part of the canon, and he's not, right? But what he did say is something that I think is more in the bucket of trustworthiness, right? Because he says that the correct way to calculate the number of the beast was something called Greece isopsephy.
Hey, Aaron, before you go there, can I make a couple of comments on what I have on the screen right now, if you don't mind? So about this. Oh, look, my cursor's on there. Could do that. So about this idea that the only way to get 666 from the name Nero is to add that N onto the end, Neron Caesar, right? However you would pronounce that.
Doesn't that, I know the 616 argument, but does that equate to 666 or does it not?
It does not, and this is what's so interesting. Okay.
So my research was flawed then, because I found a source saying that Neron Kaiser equates to 666, but it doesn't, does it?
No, no, I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question. Neron Kaiser does equal 666. But what's strange about that, it's really kind of a strange spelling, and I can prove it, okay? Because do you know that in Irenaeus, before he goes into talking about 666, he actually attacks this idea of 616 and says these guys are deceived, and maybe they're not doing it on purpose, and if they're not, then God won't punish them. But if anyone's doing this on purpose just to deceive people, coming up with this number 616, let me tell you what's going on. What was happening is that in Irenaeus's time, again, in the year AD 180, he was writing that at his time, no one had come up with the idea to change Nero's name to Neron to make it equal 666, because his name wasn't Neron, it was Nero. So in Irenaeus's day, the guys who wanted the Antichrist to be identified as Nero, they kind of did a flip of that. They said, oh, well, then John didn't really mean 666. He meant 616, because Nero Caesar in the Hebrew gematria is 616. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So this whole idea of like calling Nero Neron, it looks to me like it didn't come up until after the time of Irenaeus, because it's kind of dishonest. I mean, his name, you look in any ancient manuscripts about Nero, like I pulled up the Wikipedia article just for starters, and his name wasn't Neron, and also his name wasn't, any way you cut it, it wasn't Nero Caesar. His name was Nero. Okay, and I know it seems like I'm nitpicking here. Okay, But see what it says here in Revelation chapter 13, verse 17, the mark of or the name of the beast or the number of his name. I mean, okay, I'm nitpicking. It doesn't say name and title. And by the way, his full name and title was Nero Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus. So you kind of have to force this name for it to even come close to equaling 666, and then you have to add this N on the end of Nero. Did John do it on purpose? No, I don't believe he did. Was Nero a major type and shadow of the Antichrist? He was. He was not the one that John was referring to with the number 666. It doesn't fit. You have to tweak the name a little bit to make it fit. It's not right. Nero equals 61. Nero Caesar equals 616.
Right. So then going back
again, Irenaeus says, "Hey, that's I'm calling foul." John didn't say 616; he said 666. So,
yeah, going back to Irenaeus, Irenaeus, his book in 180 A.D. was called Against Heresies, and he literally calls the 616 idea a heresy. It's not a new idea. I think a lot of preterists in the modern age think that it's something that we discovered recently. It's not. 616 was being pushed in Irenaeus's time, which is lucky for us because he was able to come out and say, that's false, that's a heresy, it's not 616. Right?
Yeah, because people in his time were trying to make it mean the name Nero, and
they were trying. Saying, yes. So Irenaeus, affirmed that the number is flatly 666, that is what John taught. And again, this isn't Irenaeus looking at, the Gospel of John and saying, oh, Pharisees said you're not yet 50 to Jesus. This isn't like that. This is more something that it feels like Irenaeus would have been taught directly by Polycarp, who was taught directly by John. How do you calculate the number of the beast? What Irenaeus said was that you don't use the Hebrew gematria. Instead, you use the calculating system that would have been current with John's actual audience, which was the Greek-speaking people of the Eastern Empire. So the Greek-speaking people had their own method of converting a name into a number and vice versa, and that's called Greek isopsephy. And Irenaeus says it explicitly. There's no mistaking it. He says the correct method is Greek isopsephy. And in fact, if you go back to Revelation 13:18, Revelation 13:18, John says the language is this: "Here is wisdom," says John, "let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast," or calculate the number of the beast. If you look at the original Greek, the word he uses for count or calculate in Greek, in the book of John, the way he wrote it is sephisato.
There it is, right there.
It's the same word as isopsephy. And if you don't believe this, you can go research this yourself.
They don't have to, Aaron. I just put on the screen.
Good. Yeah, but if they don't believe you or your screen, they can go and
right. True.
Okay. So what do we have now? 616 doesn't fit. 666 is a weird shoehorn using the Latin name filtered through Hebrew. Okay. And adding his title of Caesar at the end, right? So it's a little shoehorning. You can make it work if you have to, if you torture it, right? It's not fatal, but what is fatal, we think, is Irenaeus coming out explicitly and saying it's not the Hebrew gematria and it's not 616. It's 666. It has to be calculated through Greek isopsephy or it's invalid. And Irenaeus even gave us 3 names that we could use.
Hey Aaron, before you go on, can I just point this out? Right here in his book Against Heresies, he literally says, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
See in the dark orange? Irenaeus literally says the Greek mode of calculation. He's saying this is not the Hebrew gematria. That's not what John meant. He meant for us to use the Greek mode.
The Greek mode, right?
That's it. And again, it's based on the word.
Which again becomes even more believable when you recognize that the word John used for calculate has the same root as isopsephy, which is the Greek mode of calculation. So, yes. It holds water. And again, isopsephy was taught by Polycarp, who was taught by John. Right. So to say that Irenaeus didn't understand Revelation is almost to say that John didn't understand it, which nobody would ever say. Right. Ryan, do you mind if I share my screen now?
Oh, not at all.
Okay. Okay. So here is a little thing. Is it sharing? Can you see it? The little thing I wrote out back on December 21st of 2024. Okay. Let me try it.
Try it again.
Okay.
Mhm.
You probably have to click share and then tell it what to share.
I am.
Sarah, it says the.
Yeah,
hold
I
on.
tried to accept it, but it's not
Okay, hold
doing
on.
it.
Oh, hold on. I think I get it.
How about now?
There.
It's sharing now, isn't it?
It was sharing Ryan's
was
screen or mine.
Oops.
Oh,
yeah.
this,
I guess that's.
this is my screen.
Oh no, is that yours, Aaron?
This is mine.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Click another button, right? Oh, that's okay.
There we go.
Let me try again.
Oh, shoot. I think I almost had it.
Okay, hold on. We're gonna have it now. Don't touch anything. Don't touch.
And Sarah, let me grab it.
Okay.
Just nobody move. Oh.
There you go.
There it is.
That's
awesome.
It.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I wrote this on December 22nd, 2024. So a year and a week ago, a year and what is that, 2 weeks ago? So
yeah,
this is when our gentleman in Damascus first came on the scene. And again, we're not, pin the tail on the Antichrist people. This is the first time in 30 years that any of us have looked at anybody and thought that they were an actual legitimate candidate for the Antichrist. We weren't the least bit seduced by the idea that Obama was, or Joe Piscopo, or Hitler, or Trump. But this guy comes on the scene in Syria, and we started looking at it more closely. And that's when I remember that Irenaeus told us how to calculate the number of the name. And so it turns out when you forget 616, because that's a heresy, said Irenaeus, when you forget the Hebrew gematria, because Irenaeus said to use isopsephy, which is the root of the word that John actually uses in Revelation, when you do all the right calculation, this is what you come up with. The name Ahmad does equate to 666. The name Nero doesn't, using Greek isopsephy. It doesn't equate to 666. Neither does Trump, neither does Jared Kushner, neither does Hitler, neither does Obama.
Let me make this
anyone
point,
that you would.
Hold on, because again, the three of us are always like fact checking each other and all that. And the reason we do that, audience, is because we are determined to operate in perfect integrity with this stuff, total intellectual honesty. And we're not perfect about it, but boy, do we try. But that's why we're always like checking each other, right? But I want to say, Aaron, that if you go to a Greek isopsephy calculator, and audience, easy, just Google it, Greek isopsephy. You could even put it like Greek gematria, and it'll know what you mean.
You could even do it by hand like we did, because I wanted to triple check, so we used a calculator. But then I went to Wikipedia and saw how to do it by hand, and I did it by hand and came up with the same result.
But here's the point I'm making, though. You actually could get all those other names if you tweak them enough, and Bill Gates entrepreneur equals 666 or whatever, right? So there's ways to make all this stuff fit, which is actually what early Christians did with Nero. We went from Nero to Nero Caesar equals 616. We need to equal 666. So now it's Neron Caesar, right? But anyways, I just want to make that clear to the audience. You could make almost any name fit if you tweak the heck out of it. It's not what John intended. John intended it to be a very simple name. Put the guy's name in, it spits out 666. That's it. Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I also thought that those names, the kind of shoehorn, twist ourselves into a pretzel names, keep adding stuff until it works. I thought that worked in the gematria, but I'm not sure that we tried that with isopsephy.
I did.
I don't know. Maybe. Oh, you did. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
all right.
Well, because it's precisely the same, concept, right? It's this letter equals this number, this letter equals this number. So you have that kind of a system, and it's fairly easy to make almost anything fit if you change the spelling and you add a consonant here and you add a title over here, right?
Well, and let's talk about the spelling of Ahmad, because we have that extra K. So you want to.
This is an example.
That, Aaron?
Good job, Sarah. Yep.
So when I was younger, I spent a bit of time in Afghanistan and Pakistan. I was around a lot of Muslims. And of course, Ryan has a lot of Muslim friends in Lebanon and Gaza and
Israel.
West Bank, I think, Israel, right? So I remembered this name because what we were trying to do is we were trying to figure out if our guy in Damascus, his name is Ahmad al-Shara, if it fit. Well, back then, a year ago, all the news media were saying his name was Ahmed, Ahmed. And there was no such name in Afghanistan or Pakistan when I was there. I spent months in 88 and months again in 1990. There was no Ahmed. In fact, there wasn't even an Ahmad, but there was the name Ahmed or Ahmad. So, you have to add those sounds if you're going to calculate it correctly.
Well, you remember we even reached out to my friend Naif in Beirut and asked him.
Right. Yeah, we reached out to an Arab.
He says
to an Arab in Beirut.
Yeah.
And the Lebanese follow Syria as closely as their own country because it's right there on the border and very volatile.
But hey, Aaron,
and he said no, I was pronouncing it Ahmad. Oh, go ahead.
I want to actually do this more thoroughly in another roundtable and really get into this work that you've done here. I mean, the point is that we found a guy today whose name actually does equal 666 according to the way that John meant it, according to the way that Irenaeus tells us to test it. It's not Nero, but remember that this shows about.
There's another thing, Ryan. So Irenaeus gave us 3 names as examples of what would yield 666 using Greek isopsephy. Those 3 names he chose were Latin, and that's because he lived during the time of the Roman Empire. So his assumption was, hey, if the Antichrist came on the scene today, he would be a Roman with a Latin name, right? But what he did was all 3 names that he chose were singular names. They were one name. They weren't 3 names. They weren't surnames.
And it wasn't a name plus a title like Caesar.
And they weren't titles, and they weren't run through some weird grammatical.
How do you turn Nero into Neuron?
To get Neron Kaiser, right? You'd have to start with a Latin.
Oh, you're cutting out.
He's cutting out a little bit.
Yeah. Ryan, we do have...
oh, wait. Am I back?
Yes, we can hear you, but you're... Yeah, go ahead.
I think I'm back. Okay, am I back fully?
I think so. Looks like it.
I feel like I'm back fully.
So
okay, let me finish my thought then. Let me finish my thought before I got cut off. So the 3 Irenaeus gives 3 and only 3 examples. All of them are first names. None of them are multiple. They're all singular names. They're not middle names. They're certainly not surname or family names. They're first names. They're a single name, not 3 put together. There's no Roman numerals, Trump, whatever the third. There's no title like Kaiser or Caesar, right? So the 3 examples that Irenaeus gives, all 3 of them are simple, singular first names. And that's what we did with this guy in Damascus. Right. And that doesn't work for Nero.
So Leaf Cat made a comment that, Sarah, I think you wanted me to address this, right? Revelation 1:1. Right. So there, it says, things which must shortly take place. But again, Leaf Cat, I don't know if you were here earlier in our live stream, but what does the word, shortly mean? Like what does quickly mean in prophecy? So we pulled up as an example the book of Zephaniah, which was written 700 years before, the destruction of the Second Temple in AD 70, where the preterists say that's like the end time stories, full preterists say that's the second coming. And it used the same kind of language 700 years earlier. This is going to quickly happen. This is near. This is at hand. So anytime we see kind of a nebulous term, we need to remember what it says in 1 Peter, is it 2 Peter? I think it's 1 Peter. 1,000 years as a day to the Lord. One day or 1,000 years as a day is 1,000 years to God, right? But then back to what we pointed out earlier, that even in Jewish thought, that it would be the 6,000 year mark after the time of Adam and Eve before the second times would take place. So I understand, and I'm not trying to discredit the concern, but when we see language like that, quickly, it's at hand, it's near, unless we have an actual timestamp, I would just consider it apocalyptic language. Okay, it has more of a connotation of it's inevitable. This is certain. This is definitely happening. Be ready. Just be ready, right? But back to Nero. Do you guys mind if I share another slide here? Hold on.
And I was thinking about Nero. I mean, did he cause the abomination of desolation? And we've decided no, he did not. He didn't enter the temple and desecrate it or sit himself on a throne and claimed himself to be God. I mean,
let's prove it. Can you see my screen?
Go ahead. Yes.
Okay. But Sarah, go ahead. You're making the point, and there's your content on the screen.
Right. So, yeah, no, go ahead and take it away.
Well, I mean, Jesus talks about, therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, which is the holy of holies in the temple. And I was tempted to include the stuff from Daniel chapter 11, but look, we're already like over time. We usually like to keep these at an hour and a half. This one's going to go to 2 hours, I think. But anyways, I love Paul because he gives us the details we need here to refute this idea of Nero, I think, once and for all. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4, Paul says, let no one deceive you by any means. That day, meaning the day that Zephaniah was talking about, the day of the Lord, the second coming, the end times, will not come unless the falling away comes first. And the man of sin is revealed. That's the Antichrist. He doesn't use the word Antichrist because that word was not coined until 50 years later by the prophet John, the apostle John, when he wrote the first and second epistles of John. Okay. So that's why Paul doesn't say the Antichrist, because that word didn't exist yet. John hadn't created it yet. The man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition, verse 4. Watch this. Who opposes and exalts himself above all that's called God, as his word, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. So this is something that the Antichrist is going to do. And this is from Daniel chapter 9 implies it. Daniel chapter 11 makes it more clear. Jesus talks about it in the Olivet Discourse that you see that up above. But then here, Paul says it like in no uncertain terms that the Antichrist, he commandeers the holy temple. He sits in the temple and shows himself to be God. Now, let me tell you something about Nero. Look it up. Please read the history. Nero not only never sat in the temple. In fact, did any of the Romans? They didn't sit in the temple. They came in and destroyed it. They knocked it to the ground. They burned everything. There's big boulders at the base of the Temple Mount wall now. You go see it yourself in person, right? Nero never sat in the temple and showed himself to be God. In fact, you guys ready for this? You guys are going to love this. You guys will dig this. Look at this. This is Al. Al knows all. Al is AI, right? No Emperor Nero never visited Jerusalem. Do you hear that? The guy never near Jerusalem. And look down below. I actually wrote about this point in part 3 of my book series coming soon. So I really dug into the history of this. Everybody, Nero never was anywhere near Jerusalem. There was this like kind of a myth or legend about him being so frustrated that he shot an arrow into the air toward Jerusalem. That's like the closest he ever got, right? And Sarah made this point earlier. In fact, look what I have highlighted in green there. The guy died by suicide, right, Sarah?
Yes. Yeah, by suicide.
AD 68, which was 2 years before the temple was even destroyed. Nero Aaron was making this point too. Nero did nothing that the Bible says the Antichrist will do. He doesn't fit any of the criteria that the Bible places on the Antichrist. The king of the north, the final king of Damascus, king of Syria, like Aaron said, bloodline. Nero, by many orders of magnitude, there's nothing about the guy that matches the Antichrist, except that we need him to be the Antichrist in order for the book of Revelation to be historical, because if it's not, then my gosh, that means that we might have to face the Antichrist, and I don't want to. I don't want there to be an end times. I don't want to live through the end times. So we have to make this all 2,000 years ago. Nero has to have been the Antichrist. He just wasn't. I mean, does his name equal 666? Yeah, if you twist and morph it and turn it every possible way and then plug it into the wrong calculator, then yeah, it equals 666. But sorry, I'm saying no to Nero. He's not the guy. So
1 John 2:18, it says, little children, it is the last hour, and as you have heard that the Antichrist is coming, even now many Antichrists have come, by which we know it is the last hour. So definitely a type and a shadow. And
many Antichrists. He says the Antichrist. There's an ultimate Antichrist. But in the meantime, there are many Antichrists. Certainly Nero was one, but he's not the Antichrist. That's a future person, probably a present person. I have a little bit more than I feel is like the Achilles heel of the preterist argument.
All right, go for it. And then I want to play your video from your class a few classes ago during your Thursday night class where he checks all. So we want to talk about the criteria, the prerequisites that lead up to set the stage for the Antichrist. But
you guys, I'm gonna actually leave you guys to it because I have to jump off.
All right.
But this has been
bummer.
wonderful.
I'm glad that you made it. That was great.
Aaron, you are literally missing the best part of this whole thing. I'm going to prove beyond any shadow of doubt that the book of Revelation was not written in AD 65. It was written 30 years later in AD 95. And nice. I got a whole bunch of people, including our everyone's like favorite first preterist, which was Eusebius. But anyways, you could watch this later if you want.
I'm going to watch it later for sure. Yep.
Okay. Hey, thanks for coming, Aaron. It's been great.
Bye, guys. Talk to you soon.
Yeah. Okay, so Sarah, let me go ahead and share my screen again, and I'll, like I said, I'm going to go through this fast so you can show show the clip, and then we can call it a show because it's already getting close to 2 hours here. So
cliffhanger for the guy in Damascus, and
yeah, exactly. My gosh, that it's everybody. The guy in Damascus. Just keep an eye. So,
yes.
So here's the thing. So here is why Revelation has to have been written in AD 65 if you're a preterist. Because in Revelation chapter 11, John writes this: I was given a reed like a measuring rod and was told, go measure the temple and God and the altar with its worshipers, but exclude the outer court and do not measure it, because it has been given to the Gentiles, and they will, future tense, trample on the holy city for 42 months. So in order for Revelation to be talking about ancient history, John would have had to have written it before the Romans came in AD 70 and actually destroyed the temple. You see the point? Because John's describing the temple. We can't say, well, maybe he means like the spiritual temple in heaven, because he says, leave out the outer court, given to the Gentiles. This is a modern day. I've been here, the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. This is a 3D model of the temple.
Well, that's a good point. Was that outer court given to the Gentiles in that time in AD 70 before it was destroyed? Was that ever?
This court right here is referred to the court of the Gentiles, and this is the royal stoa where King Herod would hang out with his buddies, right? And then this is the temple, but yeah, absolutely. And and John says here, they will trample it. They will trample on the holy city for 3.5 years. That's 42 months. So yeah, 100%. And so for John to write this and then say future tense, talking about the actual temple, including the court of the Gentiles, I mean, it's all there. That's why preterists insist that Revelation had to have been written before AD 70. So they just kind of like put a generalized date on it, AD 65, right? But see the point? Revelation had to have been written around AD 65. Hey, Sarah, you know what? I need to step away for 1 second. I'm going to stop sharing.
I'll play your video clip,
and
then that'll give you enough time to come back and we'll discuss.
Yep. Be right back. That all these conditions have to be met or pretty close to it before the Antichrist shows up on the scene. So when he shows up, all of these things have to be in place. Israel has to be a nation again. Syria has to be a nation again. Israel has to tenuously hold the Temple Mount, not just hold it, but tenuously, because if they really controlled the Temple Mount, they would just build their temple. But they've had it since 1967. They still haven't built. That's 58 years, right? The Prince of the Covenant, hypothetically, should already be on the scene. I think that's Jared Kushner. That was 2017. The covenant with many has to be already in place. That's biblical because it says that the Antichrist signs on to the treaty. He signs on to it, so the treaty already exists. And it's a treaty with many, so it's between Israel and several countries. What's our candidate for that? Obviously, the Abraham Accords, right? Revelation technologies are in place, and then the modern age, what the world looks like according to not just Judeo-Christian eschatology, but also Muslim eschatology. And everything matches, and that's, people will be running to and fro. That means unprecedented in human history. Humans will just be on the move. Is that not true in the last 100 years of the human race, especially today? Knowledge will greatly increase. Knowledge will be more available, more easily available. All human knowledge. This is all human knowledge, and you can access any of it instantly. That's pretty wild, right? In Muslim eschatology, it describes transgenderism, LGBTQ, like worse than ever. That's a culture, it's a spirit. And then giant cities, they'll build towering structures. Last 100 years, right? Judeo-Christian eschatology, all the points that the Antichrist, whoever he turns out to be, whoever he is, he has to check all these boxes when he first shows up on the scene. This guy checks all the boxes. That was great.
Yeah, that was by far like the best. You just like went through everyone point by point, the prerequisites, and then the check boxes that Ahmad al-Shara is now currently, he's meeting the criteria of the Antichrist. And it's just remarkable to see your study and bringing this to the table. So yeah.
I love that you include that. You said you were going to include a clip, and I didn't quite catch what it was, but I think that's perfect for this, live stream and what we're talking about, because so many Christians today are looking back 2,000 years and saying, Nero was the Antichrist. I think we've shown that you can't make a good argument that he was. I mean, not by a long shot. And in the meantime, the real Antichrist, the actual Antichrist, may very well be seated on the throne in Damascus as we speak. I mean, wake up, everybody. Yes. The end times are upon us now. Irenaeus and all the other early church fathers, and even the Talmud, the Jewish Talmud, say that the end times, which includes the Antichrist, et cetera, is going to take place literally in our time. We're in the year 2026. It just started, and this is precisely on the calendar where everybody 2,000 years ago said, yeah, it's going to happen then, right? So let's go ahead and wrap up this point I was making. Bear with me. I need to share my screen here. But yeah, good job showing that. So yeah, everybody, I mean, there's a reason why we're really pushing this point. It is important.
Yes, okay. And we want to be watchful, and we're still looking. It hasn't been completed yet,
So is that showing, or?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, let me double check. Okay, good. Okay, great. Okay, so again, this is why the preterists insist, and I'm telling you, this is the Achilles heel, if there is one, preterism. I think there's several. If there's only one, this is it. That because John very explicitly describes the physical temple standing in Jerusalem in the future tense to his writing, that preterists say, well, he has to have written it before the second temple was destroyed. Therefore, Revelation was written in AD 65. We cry foul, me and Sarah, Aaron, and say, no, the book of Revelation was written 30 years after that, in the year AD 95, 25 years, a full quarter century after the second temple was destroyed, which means that if John is writing in Revelation about a physical temple standing in Jerusalem in the future tense, there has to be a third temple on the horizon. There has to be an actual third physical holy Jewish temple built on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem sometime in the future. We think it's very, very near future. So was it written in AD 65 like the preterists say? Well, look at this. Okay, so back to this. Yes. Okay, so everybody remembers Irenaeus from earlier in our talk. Irenaeus was the disciple of Polycarp, who was the disciple of John himself, who wrote the book of Revelation. And look what Irenaeus said. So we looked at this part earlier. If it were necessary that his name, the Antichrist, should be distinctly revealed in this present times, he says the Antichrist, it would have been announced by him. That's John, who beheld the apocalyptic vision. That's the book of Revelation. Which, by the way, just to emphasize again, Irenaeus, who was the disciple of John's disciple, is putting the Antichrist in his future and saying even in his time, we don't need to know his name because he hasn't come along yet. Look what he says. He said, Irenaeus says, for that was seen not no very long time since, but almost in our day, towards the end of Domitian's reign, he says. And Domitian was a Roman emperor. He's the one who stuck John on the Isle of Patmos, where John wrote the book of Revelation. Look at his reign. He reigned from the year AD 81 to 96. He didn't even start his reign until more than 10 years after the second temple was destroyed. Toward the end of his reign would be what? The year AD 95. So Irenaeus, who was like trained by the guy who was trained by John, how's he going to get the date wrong on the book of Revelation? And he says, no, Revelation was written in AD 95. He just says it in no uncertain terms right here, right?
Yep.
I mean that's compelling, isn't it?
That
and check this out. And here's what I'll say, and I didn't put together the content, and I'm going to do more work on this whole topic, but I can tell you that every early church father who commented on the date of the writing of the book of Revelation, every single one says the same thing, that John wrote the book of Revelation in the year AD 95, end of Domitian's reign, including this guy. So Sarah, you remember me mentioning Eusebius earlier.
Mm-hmm.
The reason Eusebius is important to this discussion is because the preterists all say, look, this guy Eusebius, man, he lived, so long ago, 1700 years ago, and he was a preterist. Well, I'm going to beg to differ. I don't think Eusebius was a preterist. I don't think Eusebius. I've read most of his stuff, not all of it yet. I'm working on it. Eusebius, in his writings, his main one is called Church History, and he really more says, hey, the destruction of the temple in AD 70 was like a type and shadow. It's like an archetype, right? The true preterist, doctrine did not get developed until the 15 and 1600s by these two guys. Okay, so in the first 1500 years of Christianity, there's one guy who they kind of say was kind of preterist. Look at this though. Even Eusebius, everyone's favorite preterist, says that the book of Revelation was written near the end of the reign of the Emperor Domitian, placing its composition around what? What date do you see there, Sarah?
I actually 95 AD.
Yep, AD 95. So
yes.
So again, I'll say it again. Not just Irenaeus, who was the disciple of John's disciple, so he would have known, but not just him. Every early church father says that Revelation was written around the year AD 95. 30 years after the preterists needed to have been written for their model to remotely work. And again, I challenge the preterists with this. I always bring this up. Well, what about the fact that all the early church fathers say that Revelation, and they all say, nope, they were all wrong. I mean, I just don't understand how these guys today who are preterists, and we have some watching right now, I know, how you guys can make the claim that you know better than all the guys who learned directly from the apostles, how you know better about, when Revelation was written than the disciple of John himself. I mean, give me a break. So hundreds of years, 1,500 years of Christianity, everybody's saying, John wrote the book of Revelation in the year AD 95. But here you guys come along and you're going to set the record straight. No, it was written in AD 65. And why? What's your proof? Oh, because the temple was destroyed in AD 70, so it has to have been written in AD 65. That's circular reasoning. That's nonsense. It's just, it's not an argument. So
all right.
Sorry to get mean at the end there.
Good points, Ryan. Thanks for geeking out on this and showing us truth and getting to the bottom of it. So we really do appreciate your guys' comments and just cueing us in on what you're thinking. And we have a few more comments, but we'll respond to those apart from the live stream. And yeah, Ryan, it's been good.
I will say one thing real quick, because Leaf Cat makes another good point here. There is no prophecy for a third temple. See, I beg to differ. Man, we just read it. Revelation chapter 11 clearly prophesies a third temple. Irenaeus, we didn't get into it, but he goes into extreme detail about a future physical third temple on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. But you make the point, Leaf Cat, which you're right, not to say Israel seems to want to usher in the Antichrist. And I think what you're saying is that Israel is primed and ready to rebuild the Holy Temple. They're 100% ready. For the first time in 2,000 years, they own Jerusalem and the Temple Mount. That third temple is coming soon. So just keep watching. And we're not mad at anybody. We're all brothers and sisters in Christ. I just want all of us to be ready. This didn't all happen 2,000 years ago. This is all happening now. The Antichrist didn't live 2,000 years ago. The Antichrist is probably in Damascus, like as we're talking right now. Yeah. So just give it a chance, you guys. Just open your eyes. Be willing to look at it. Hey, maybe we are in the end times. Maybe this stuff really is happening. Go check out our ministry if you want to learn more. So
yeah.
Okay.
TheseFinalDays.org. You can check out the ministry. Also, Pastor Ryan has a couple of books out right now, working on book 3. How's it going with that, Ryan? Book 3?
Coming
Close.
soon.
I can't
TM.
wait. I can't wait.
Yeah, I couldn't work on it the last 2 days because I was working on putting together the content for this live stream. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
So
but as soon as we're
I'm gonna
done
free
here, I'm
you
gonna
up a
hit it.
little bit.
Oh, I'm gonna hit it hard. So yeah,
All right.
getting there.
Awesome. All right. Well, yeah, it was fun.
It was fun. Do you want to
Yeah.
close in prayer?
Yes, I do. Leaf Cat says, I'm not mad nor a full preterist. Well, it's good to know. Glad you're not mad. Just want to
Yeah,
have a
cool, 'cause-
discussion and,
Oh, we love all you guys. Thank you for joining
we
us.
want truth. And, hey, if we're wrong in any area, I would want to know. I want to be corrected. I want, to remove the deception in my life wherever it is and allow God
Absolutely.
to, show me truth. And so,
Amen. We're all in this
hopefully-
together. We all have
Yeah.
the same enemy, which is Satan, wants us all to be
Right.
deceived and miss it. And we're not going to do that,
That's
right?
Yes. All right, let's pray. Father, thank you so much for your word and your love for us, God, and how you call us into all truth. God, I pray that you would just fill us to overflow with your Holy Spirit, that your presence would just be strong in our life, Lord, that you would lead and guide us into all truth. And Lord, wherever there's deception, wherever we have held onto strongholds and ways of thinking and patterns of thinking that do not line up with your word or your truth, Lord, I just pray that you would remove that you would break those strongholds in our life, and that you would set us free. And God, we just thank you so much that we're continuing to grow and we're watchful. And Lord, help us to just have hearts that are ready for whatever season that you're calling us into this day, Lord. May we be ready. May we be found worthy of the calling to be called Christians, to bear your name in this life, Lord. We just thank you so much. We love you. We love your word. And we just bless and honor you, Jesus.
Yeah.
Amen. Amen.
Amen. All right. Thank you,
All
Sarah.
right. See
Thank you,
ya.
everybody. Lots of
Thank
fun.
you.
We'll do it again in a
Yes.
couple weeks.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Are you wrestling with questions about the end times, the rapture, and what the Bible really says about the future? Then you'll want to get a hold of These Final Days, Part 1 by Ryan Speakman. A clear, scripture-based look at the rapture, the four horsemen, and the events leading to the Great Tribulation. Speakman challenges popular views and dives deep into Jesus' teaching in Matthew 24 and the book of Revelation. Explore These Final Days, Books 1 and 2 at thesefinaldays.org or on Amazon. Book 2 takes you even deeper, uncovering the catastrophic event that will launch the tribulation, the mission of the two witnesses, the rise of the Antichrist, and the soon-coming Third Temple in Jerusalem. Are you ready to learn more about this complex issue of the last days? Explore These Final Days, Books 1 and 2 at thesefinaldays.org or on Amazon.